The sun bathed the kitchen in a warm glow as I bustled around, preparing for the family dinner that had become a frequent fixture in our lives. The aroma of roasted chicken mingled with the sweetness of caramelized vegetables, filling the air with a sense of comfort. I always loved these gatherings. They were a chance to reconnect, to share laughter, and to strengthen the bonds that held our family together. Little did I know, however, that the very fabric of those bonds was about to be tested in ways I could never have imagined. As I set the table with our best dinnerware, I felt an unusual heaviness settle in my chest. It wasn't just the anticipation of the meal or the bustle of family life. There was something lurking just beneath the surface. I brushed it off, attributing it to the stress of hosting, but as each family member arrived, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, scrutinized. Their smiles felt strained, and the laughter that usually filled our home felt muted, as if a dark cloud hovered just out of sight. I caught snippets of conversation, laughter that suddenly stopped when I entered the room. I tried to engage, to bring back the warmth that typically enveloped us, but the tension was palpable. It was as if I had stepped into a play where I no longer knew my lines. I noticed Lila, my sister-in-law, her demeanor impeccably polished, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. She moved seamlessly through the crowd, but there was an edge to her charisma that made my skin crawl. I had always found her charming, but tonight she seemed almost predatory. As we gathered around the dining table, I could feel the weight of their gazes, the whispers simmering just below the surface. I tried to focus on the meal, on the laughter that surrounded me, but the unease gnawed at me. I glanced at Lila, who sat across from me, her fork poised elegantly above her plate as she engaged my brother in conversation. It was then that I caught a few words, a sharp, cutting remark that struck me deeply. She was spinning a narrative, weaving a tale that portrayed me in an unflattering light, her voice dripping with feigned concern. With every word she uttered, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. The accusation she hinted at, the insinuation of betrayal, wrapped around me like a vice. My heart raced as I tried to brush off her words, to convince myself that they were mere fabrications, but the looks from my family told a different story. Their expressions shifted, curiosity mixed with skepticism, as if they were weighing the truth of her claims against the reality they knew of me. Dinner progressed, but I was no longer present in the moment. My thoughts raced as I replayed Lila's words over and over in my mind. How could she do this? What had prompted her to attack my character so viciously? I had always tried to be kind to her, to include her in our family dynamics, yet here she was, throwing daggers in the form of whispers and half-truths. The warmth of the meal turned to ash in my mouth, and I struggled to swallow, to maintain my composure as the atmosphere thickened with tension. Finally, the meal ended, and I felt a weight settle in my heart. I could no longer ignore the gnawing doubts that crept into my mind. I needed to confront my brother, to seek clarity in the midst of the chaos Lila had created. I found him in the living room, standing by the window, the evening light casting shadows across his face. I approached him, my heart pounding in my chest, ready to voice my fears and seek his support. But as I spoke, hoping for understanding, I was met with dismissal. His words, laced with doubt, cut deeper than I had anticipated. He believed Lila over me, and in that moment I felt utterly alone. With my heart heavy and my mind swirling with confusion, I retreated to my room. The walls felt closer, the shadows deeper, as I sat on the edge of my bed, grappling with the enormity of my situation. I had always prided myself on being resilient, on standing tall in the face of adversity, but this was different. It was personal, a betrayal from within my own family, and it ignited a fire within me. I would not let Lila's lies define me. I would uncover the truth, restore my reputation, and expose the darkness that lingered in the shadows of our family. Determined to take back control of my narrative, I began my quest for information about Lila. I was acutely aware that I needed to tread carefully, for I was venturing into a territory fraught with potential pitfalls. My first step was to reach out to friends and family, those who had known Lila longer than I had, those who might hold pieces of the puzzle that could help me reveal her manipulative nature. I started with a few close friends of mine, people who had witnessed the dynamics between Lila and me. As I sat across from Jenna at our favorite cafe, I could feel the tension in my shoulders gradually easing, replaced by a sense of purpose. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice as if the very act of speaking about Lila could conjure her presence. I wanted to lay the groundwork for a strategy that would expose her without causing a rift in the family that I held so dear. Jenna listened intently, her brow furrowing as I recounted my experiences with Lila, the subtle jabs disguised as humor, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she was around me. I could see Jenna's expression shift, the realization dawning on her that Lila's charm was merely a facade. We spent hours discussing the best way to gather evidence, crafting our approach with care. I wanted to ensure that when the time came to confront Lila, I would not only have the truth on my side but also the respect of my family intact. As days went by, I found myself reflecting on moments that had previously seemed innocuous but now glimmered with significance. I recalled the way Lila had once attempted to turn my husband, Mark, against me, planting seeds of doubt about my commitment to our marriage. I had brushed it off at the time, attributing it to jealousy or an overactive imagination, but now those memories felt heavy with meaning. It was almost as if Lila had been biding her time, waiting for the right moment to strike. The anecdote I gathered painted a clearer picture of who Lila truly was. I spoke with other relatives, some of whom had experienced her manipulations firsthand. They shared their stories, confirming what I had suspected all along. Lila thrived on chaos, using her charm to mask her true intentions. With each revelation, my resolve strengthened. I was no longer just a victim of her lies. I was armed with knowledge, ready to confront the darkness she had cast over my life. It became clear to me that the confrontation was inevitable. I needed to be prepared, to have my facts laid out in a way that would leave no room for doubt. I envisioned standing in front of my family, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief as I laid bare Lila's treachery. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but it also ignited a fire within me. I could no longer remain silent while Lila twisted the narrative to suit her needs. With each passing day, I practiced what I would say, rehearsing my words until they flowed with conviction. I imagined Lila's reaction, the way her carefully crafted mask would slip as I confronted her with the truth. I could almost see the panic in her eyes as I presented my evidence, the stories, the testimonies that would expose her for who she truly was. As I prepared myself for the inevitable showdown, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I was no longer the woman cowering beneath the weight of false accusations. I was a warrior, ready to fight for my name, my dignity, and my place within my family. The shadows that Lila had cast would no longer obscure my truth. I was ready to step into the light and unveil the reality that had been hidden for far too long. As I walked into the cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped me, a stark contrast to the heaviness that lingered in my mind. I spotted Lila seated at a corner table, her demeanor deceptively calm, yet I could almost feel the tension crackling in the air as I approached her. I took a moment to compose myself, mentally rehearsing my strategy. I needed to navigate this encounter carefully, maintaining an air of casualness while probing her about the malicious rumors she had spread. As I settled into the chair across from her, I offered a polite smile, but my heart raced beneath the surface. I initiated small talk, subtly steering the conversation toward the whispers that had begun to echo through our family. Lila responded with her usual charm, but I could see the flicker of anxiety in her eyes, a tiny crack in her polished facade that gave me hope. I pressed on, mentioning the comments I had overheard, watching her expression closely as she deflected my inquiries with practiced ease. Each evasive answer only fueled my determination. It was as if I could sense the truth just beneath her surface, waiting to be unearthed. I felt a rush of power as I observed her discomfort. The way she fiddled with her coffee cup, the slight tremor in her voice, it was all revealing. I had been on the defensive for too long, and now it was my turn to take control of the narrative. Every question I asked was layered with intention, probing deeper into the heart of her deceit. I was no longer the victim, I was the hunter and she was the prey. Through what felt like an eternity, the meeting concluded and I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air as a sense of exhilaration washed over me. But just as I was about to lose myself in thoughts of my next move, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Mark, Lila's close friend. The text was short but impactful. He expressed his concerns about Lila's behavior, hinting at a darker side that he had witnessed. My heart raced again, but this time not from anxiety. It was the thrill of potential. Mark could be my ally, a key player in my plan to expose Lila's true nature. I leaned against a nearby lamppost, my mind racing with possibilities. If I could convince Mark to share what he knew, it could provide the evidence I desperately needed to turn the family's suspicion toward Lila. I could already envision the confrontation, her carefully constructed web of lies unraveling before everyone's eyes. The thought sent a wave of hope coursing through me. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. With renewed determination, I began to draft a response to Mark, carefully choosing my words to convey my intent without revealing too much too soon. I needed to approach this delicately, building trust while also preparing to gather crucial information. Each keystroke felt like a step closer to reclaiming my life from the shadows that Lila had cast over it. I was ready to take action, to gather the pieces I needed to confront her with undeniable truths. As I walked home, my mind raced with plans and strategies, the weight of my earlier despair lifting just a little. The world felt brighter, and I could almost see the light at the end of the tunnel. I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was prepared to face them. I was done being the victim of Lila's schemes. Truth was on my side, and I was determined to unveil it, no matter the cost. The anticipation of my meeting with Mark filled the air with a charged energy that I could hardly contain. As I walked into the coffee shop, the familiar aroma of roasted beans wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, yet my heart raced with anxiety. I spotted him seated at a corner table, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his cup. There was an earnestness in his demeanor that gave me hope, and I took a deep breath before approaching him. As I settled across from him, the casual small talk felt like a prelude to a much heavier conversation. I could see the concern etched across his face, and it mirrored my own turmoil. When Mark finally opened up about Lila, his words tumbled out like a cascade of secrets that had long been buried. He spoke of her past relationships, her knack for manipulation, and how she had a history of turning people against each other. Each revelation felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place, illuminating the dark corners of Lila's character that I had only glimpsed before. The weight of this knowledge pressed upon me, filling me with renewed strength and purpose. Mark's account of Lila's betrayals and her ability to charm her way out of trouble made my blood boil. I could hardly believe that someone so close to me could wield such power over our family dynamics. As he detailed an incident where Lila had turned a mutual friend against another, the realization struck me with a force that was both shocking and validating. This woman had been playing a game that I was unaware of, and I was determined to expose her for what she truly was. With each passing moment, I felt the embers of my resolve igniting into a fierce flame. I left the coffee shop with a plan forming in my mind, a clear path to confront Lila during the next family gathering. I had gathered evidence, a collection of anecdotes and testimonies that painted a vivid picture of Lila's true self. The thought of standing up for myself, of reclaiming my narrative, filled me with an exhilarating mix of fear and empowerment. The shadows that had loomed over me were beginning to lift, and I knew that I had the strength to face whatever was to come. In the days leading up to the family event, I threw myself into preparation. I meticulously collected my evidence, organizing my thoughts and strategies like a soldier readying for battle. Each piece of information felt like ammunition, each story a weapon in my fight for justice. I practiced my speech in front of the mirror, my reflection staring back at me with a fierce determination I had never seen before. I envisioned the confrontation, rehearsing the words that would expose Lila's lies, and with each iteration I grew more confident. Yet, as the day approached, anxiety gnawed at the edges of my resolve. I wondered if I would falter, if the fear of confrontation would overwhelm me. I envisioned the faces of my family, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief as I laid bare the truth. Would they stand by me, or would they be swayed by Lila's charm once again? The uncertainty clawed at me, but I refused to let it paralyze me. I had to believe that the truth would prevail. The night before the gathering, sleep eluded me as my mind raced with possibilities and outcomes. I could almost hear the whispers of doubt creeping back in, but I pushed them away. I could not afford to let Lila's influence seep into my thoughts any longer. I was ready to reclaim my life, to confront the shadows that had haunted me for far too long. Finally, the day arrived, and as I dressed, I felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. I took one last look in the mirror, straightening my posture, steeling my gaze. I was no longer the woman burdened by rumors. I was Avery, armed with the truth and ready to fight for my honor. As I stepped out of my house, I felt the weight of my decision settle upon my shoulders, and I knew that I was ready to face whatever awaited me. The atmosphere inside the house was jubilant, an illusion of warmth and togetherness that clashed violently with the turmoil boiling within me. Laughter echoed against the walls, the clinking of glasses punctuated the air, and yet I felt like an outsider watching a play unfold, a spectator in a world that no longer felt like my own. I could see the smiles plastered on family members' faces, their eyes sparkling with joy, but the weight of Lila's rumors loomed heavily in my mind. Today was the day I would no longer remain silent. As I observed the gathering, an array of emotions surged through me, fear, anger, but above all, a fierce resolve. They were all blissfully unaware of the treachery lurking in their midst, and I would not let that continue. I could feel the pulse of the room quicken with every passing moment, the clock inching closer to the time I would take a stand. I had rehearsed my words countless times, each iteration shaping my resolve. I would reclaim my dignity, my truth, and in doing so expose Lila for the deceiver she was. When I finally stood up, the room fell silent. I could feel their eyes on me, curiosity mingling with apprehension as I cleared my throat. The celebratory chatter faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the steady thrum of my heart. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the present moment, and began to speak. My voice, steady yet filled with emotion, recounted the twisted narrative Lila had woven around me, the insidious whispers that had infiltrated my life. Each word I spoke felt like a small victory, a reclamation of my identity that had been so cruelly distorted. I described how Lila had painted me as unfaithful, a character far removed from the person I truly was. I spoke of the heartache, the isolation, the way her lies had seeped into the very fabric of my relationships, straining bonds that I had cherished. My family's faces shifted from confusion to disbelief, the realization dawning upon them like the slow breaking of dawn. I could see their expressions change as they processed the gravity of what I was saying, their initial skepticism wavering. As I continued, I felt the tide turning. I had rehearsed this moment, but the raw desperation of my truth felt like a tidal wave crashing over the carefully constructed facade Lila had crafted. Just as I began to believe that I might reach them, I noticed Lila's posture shift. She was no longer the composed woman who had so effortlessly manipulated our family. Instead, I saw the cracks in her facade begin to form, a flicker of panic etched into her features. I paused, allowing my words to sink in, to settle like dust in the air. It was then that I reached for the evidence I had meticulously gathered. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my phone, ready to unveil the testimony from Mark, Lila's close friend. The room held its breath, the anticipation thickening the air. I glanced at Lila, who was now visibly rattled, her once confident demeanor slipping away like sand through fingers. I presented the information I had gathered, recounting Mark's words and the admissions he had shared with me. Gasps echoed around the room, the collective intake of breath filled with disbelief and shock. I could feel the energy shift, the air crackling with the weight of revelation. It was a moment I had envisioned countless times, yet the reality of it was far more potent than I had imagined. The family's gaze shifted between me and Lila, their expressions transforming from shock to a dawning comprehension of the truth. I stood firm, my heart racing but my spirit unyielding. This was no longer just about me, it was about justice, about unmasking a deceit that threatened to tear us apart. I had fought for my truth, and I would not back down now. The room felt charged, the balance of power shifting as Lila's carefully constructed world began to crumble around her, revealing the truth that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. The atmosphere in the room shifted as Lila's desperation took hold. Her attempts to turn my family against me were almost laughable, but the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on my heart. I stood there, the evidence I had meticulously gathered still clutched in my hands. The faces of my family, once clouded by doubt and suspicion, began to change. I could see the flicker of realization dawning in their eyes as they processed the truth that lay bare before them. They were witnessing Lila's true self, stripped of the charm and deceit she usually cloaked herself in. As I glanced around, I felt a swell of emotions, fear, relief, and a glimmer of newfound strength. My brother's expression was a mix of confusion and regret, and I could see my parents' disbelief slowly morphing into understanding. They had been misled, and now they were beginning to confront the reality of Lila's manipulations. I could almost hear the whispers of doubt that had once surrounded me dissipating into the air like smoke. Lila, I thought, you've underestimated the bonds of our family. The evidence I had presented, including Mark's testimony, seemed to hang in the air, palpable and undeniable. Gasps from my family members echoed the betrayal they felt, not just from Lila, but also from the choices they had made in believing her over me. I could almost feel the walls closing in around Lila, her facade cracking under the weight of her lies. The realization that she had lost their trust was etched onto her face, a mixture of anger and fear that was almost pitiful to witness. In that moment, my family rallied around me, the warmth of their support enveloping me like a protective shield. Apologies flowed, heartfelt and sincere, and I could sense the guilt they carried for not believing my side of the story sooner. My heart swelled with gratitude, but there was also an undercurrent of sadness for the chasm Lila had created between us. I felt the sting of betrayal still fresh, but I knew that healing would come with time. Lila, cornered and exposed, struggled to maintain her composure. The desperation transformed into a fierce defiance as she opened her mouth to speak, her words tumbling out in a frantic attempt to regain control. But it was too late. The truth had emerged, and there was no denying the jealousy that had festered inside her. Her motives, once hidden behind a veil of charm, were laid bare for all to see. "I never wanted to be like you, Avery," she finally spat, the venom in her voice palpable. "You think you're so perfect, living a life everyone envies. I was just trying to bring you down to my level." The admission hung in the air, a bitter truth that sliced through the tension like a knife. My heart ached not just for myself, but for her, trapped in a cycle of envy and bitterness that had driven her to such depths. As the family processed her words, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The battle I had fought was not just for my reputation, but for the integrity of our family. I could see the realization dawning on everyone that Lila's jealousy had been the catalyst for her actions. The support I received from my family was a balm to my soul, a reminder that love and truth could prevail even in the darkest moments. Lila's downfall was not a victory I reveled in, rather it was a painful reminder of the fragility of relationships. As she stood there, isolated and ostracized, I felt a twinge of sympathy for what she had become. I had fought hard for my place in this family, and now that I had regained it, I wasn't interested in reveling in her misery. I had learned that truth, while powerful, could also bring about devastating consequences. With Lila's manipulation finally exposed, I could feel the warmth of my family's embrace surrounding me. I was no longer the outcast. I was Avery, their daughter, sister, and friend. The shadows of doubt and betrayal began to recede, and as I stood there, surrounded by love and support, I felt a profound sense of justice restored. Power of truth had triumphed, and I was finally at peace.